In this video, I'll share with you 6 of my favorite tips for saving fuel while camping and hiking. If you're interested, stay tuned. As a bushcrafter, I enjoy making fires while I'm out in the woods. I use them for cooking or purifying water or just heating water for a coffee or a tea. I also enjoy practicing the skills of making fires, especially in more primitive methods like bow drill or flint and steel. But because of the ongoing fire ban here in Nova Scotia, I've had to give that up for the time being. That means I have to use some type of a fuel stove, such as a isobutane canister stove, white gas or Coleman fuel stove, or my preference, an alcohol stove, in this case the Trangia knockoff by Alex. And it got me to thinking about how I could preserve fuel and use less during my hike so I wouldn't have to carry as much, or so I don't run out if I'm out there for a while. So I put together a short list of things that I like to do to preserve fuel, and I'm going to share this with you now. Tip number 1, don't rely on your stove for sterilizing water. When you have a wood fire, you have a lot more fuel available to you, well, whatever's available around you. And if you have the time and you have the capacity, you can sterilize most of the water you need. But when you're relying on an alcohol stove or one of the other fuel stoves, you only have so much fuel that you can carry with you. It takes a lot of fuel to bring 2 liters of water to boil, and you need a lot of water during the warmer months. So relying on your stove is really not a good, effective way of saving fuel. What you should be using is some type of a filtering system. Now in my case, I have a couple of systems, but the ones I've been carrying this summer most of the time is my Sawyer Mini attached to my Canuck Vecto water container. And I've been testing this out for quite a while now, and I will be doing a follow-up video on it. I have done an introductory video on it, and I'm finding this to be quite an effective combination. Small and compact when I'm not in use, and very effective for either pressure pushing the water out through the Mini, or for letting it hang and drip with gravity. But that's the material for another video. Tip number 2, choose meals that have a minimum of preparation time, such as a mountain house, or in this case a backpacker's pantry, or a homemade dehydrated meal, which is what I use most often. By using one of those meals, you really only have to bring your water to boiling. Actually, you don't even have to bring it all the way to boiling, but you use a minimum amount of fuel by heating your water up, and then these things cook right in the bag. And we'll talk more about that in a second, how we can maximize doing that as well. But choosing meals that have a minimum amount of preparation will save you a lot of fuel. Tip number 3, pre-soak your meal. This doesn't apply to mountain house or backpacker's pantry freeze-dried meals, but it does apply to a lot of the home dehydrated meals, such as the one I have here. So when I prepare these meals, what I do is take my vegetables or other materials and cook them, and then dehydrate them and put them into bags. Most of the time, just adding hot water is enough to rehydrate them and make them edible. But sometimes it takes a little bit more. If I have the time and the fuel, simmering will actually soften the materials up and make them a little bit better. But if I want to save fuel, one thing I can do is when I get to the location, I can take the pot or my cook pot, place this inside, put some cold, clean, sterile water in on top of it, and let it sit for a little while I go about my other camp duties. Then, when I'm ready to eat, the material will be partially rehydrated by the cold water. All I really have to do is bring it up to heat, let it sit for a little while, and finish off the rehydration process. Tip number 4, use a Cosy. Now, when I first started getting into making alcohol stoves, I decided I'd also make a whole lot of Cosys. So I had bought the Reflectix material at Home Depot, and I experimented with different designs. One is like this. It's a small envelope design, which allows me to put a smaller freezer bag down inside of it and fold it over. And sometimes I have an elastic that I can wrap around it that'll keep it shut, and then I can leave it rehydrate and stay warm inside the Cosy. This is a larger version of the same thing. This one I actually is the one I would use more often because it's a better size for getting bags inside of. But even then I found that it wasn't doing the best of job, so I kind of evolved into something like this. And this is kind of a box shape, and it's actually one Cosy inside the other, so I get twice the amount of insulation around the material. And what I'll do is this, because of the box shape, it allows the water to more evenly distribute itself among the contents of the bag. So my material would be full of hot water. I would place it inside of one half of the Cosy, Put the other half on and just set it aside. And 20 minutes, half hour later, if I wanted to leave it that long, I'll come back and it's still boiling hot, just under the boiling temperature. So it's quite a good way of keeping the food hot while it rehydrates. So that's one style. Another style is something like this. And this is more of a canister style. And I'll show you how that works in a second. So using a Cosy, there's a couple different ways you can do it. One, such as I just mentioned with the bag itself, is to bring your water to a boil or near boil. Place the water inside of the bag, the right amount of water to rehydrate the meal that you have. Stir it around inside to get the water evenly distributed. Close and seal the bag, pushing out as much air as you reasonably can without burning yourself. And then placing it inside the Cosy and setting it aside. The other way is to actually start cooking the meal inside of a pot on the alcohol stove. So you might bring your water to a boil or near boil. Turn your stove down to a simmer. Start to cook the meal for a short period of time, especially if it's one of those meals that take a little longer to fully rehydrate. Then turn your stove off. Take the whole stove, and I'll show you how that works now, and place it inside of a Cosy. So this is a little homemade kit that I made up. It's just a small canister, probably a coffee canister at one time, that I made up with a bail, and I designed the Cosy to fit around it. So I have used this to take and place right inside of the Cosy, and the other half of the Cosy will go on top. So the meal stays inside of the pot, inside of the Cosy, and I can set that aside and let it rehydrate for a little while. And it won't take too long at that point for it to come to a fully cooked meal. Now, one thing I do want to point out, if you're using a metal canister and placing it inside of a Reflectix Cosy, is that sometimes it might stick. Now, if it's a clean canister, I've had no experience, even coming right off of a alcohol flame, with it sticking to the Mylar material, Reflectix material. It hasn't stuck for me, but what I have had is, you'll notice that this is a little sooty because I have used this over fires as well. If there's any sticky soot on it, yeah, sometimes that does stick to the material. Either it makes it hard to get in or it gets inside and then makes it hard to get out of the Cosy. So what I'll do on occasion is use my bandana. Lay the bandana down, place the pot inside of it, pick it up by the four corners closed. Now remember, this is hot, so you do have to be cautious when you do this. And then you can place all of that inside of your Cosy, and you won't risk sticking to the inside of the Cosy. Now, this Cosy was designed just for this pot, so it won't work. It does, but I have to push it in, and so that's not the best way to do it. So I have yet another Cosy, which is very inexpensive. No work required making it. You don't have to buy the whole roll of Reflectix, which does come at a cost, and it's available to most people. That is a lunch bag. So I picked this very inexpensive lunch bag up at Dollarama for $2. And it has a Reflectix type material inside of it, and it's quite big. And of course, it's reinforced with nylon on the outside. This works very well. Grabbing my pot with the bandana around it. When I open it up, I can place the whole pot down inside, close it over with the Velcro, and just set it aside and wait the whatever length of time, 15-20 minutes, for it to fully hydrate. So you can use it with a pot. You can use it with any size bag. In the wintertime, if you have a mountain house or one of the freeze-dried meals, it can benefit from a little added warmth, so it's still warm when you go to eat it. Pack this along, drop the whole bag down inside of there, and this will work just fine. And you haven't spent a lot of money on this. One other thing, or a couple of other things you could use if you don't have a Cosy with you, either a pre-made one like I have, these ones made from Reflectix, or the dollar store lunch bag, is you can use a sweater, a jacket, or even your sleeping bag, although be cautious that your bag is, or the pot is not so hot that it sticks to any of those things. So again, you may want to wrap it inside of the bandana. But any piece of clothing or sleep gear will help keep that pot warm, or the bag of hot water warm, so that it stays warmer longer and makes it still warm when it's fully hydrated. Tip number 5, learn how much fuel it takes to bring the water to a boil. And what I mean is by that is different stoves will consume alcohol, if that's what you're using, at a different rate. So if you're using an alcohol stove, it's good to learn just how much fuel it takes to bring water to a boil and add only that amount to your stove. Now that applies primarily to stoves that don't have a means of saving fuel after you put the flame out. So I'm referring primarily to a lot of the homemade ones, like this little one, pop can stove, one of the pressurized penny stove type or this, which is my homemade Fancy Feast stove. So with these, it's not easy to recover the fuel, even if I am able to put the flame out after I'm finished bringing my water to a boil. So from experience, I learned just how much fuel it is I'm going to require to bring my water to a boil. I tend to carry my fuel in a couple of containers, one of which, these are these little 5-hour energy drink bottles that you can get once I clean them out and put alcohol in them. They're quite sturdy and they're watertight, and I can carry a small amount of fuel. Really, that's only good for a day hike. That's not going to do you for very many meals, probably only 2, maybe 3 meals. So if I'm out for a longer period of time, then I have these other type of canisters which will keep my alcohol inside of them. Now, having said that, even with these canisters, I usually place both of them inside of plastic bags, either Ziploc bags or a shopping bag or something like that, just in the event that they leak. I haven't had that experience so far, but I wouldn't want these leaking inside of my backpack, or even worse, inside of my cook kit, and then getting them all contaminated and losing my fuel at the same time. So it's better safe than sorry, so I double bag these things. Now, with a stove like the Trangia, or in this case the Alux knockoff, you can conserve fuel right in the stove. Now, I'm hearing recently that it's not recommended because sometimes these things will leak around. Now, this does have a little bit of alcohol in it from my last time out. Sometimes they're leaking around the weld mark, or actually it's just more of a folding crimp. And especially as they get older, sometimes the heat will cause the material to crack. I haven't had that experience, but the experience I have had with this specific one is that the rubber O-ring inside of the cap has shrunk over time. So I have found that even with the cap on, that occasionally, if I shake it, then yeah, I'll get a little drip of alcohol out through them. So it is better if you carry them empty, but if you can carry them with a little bit of fuel in them from one meal to the next, and carry it inside of a plastic bag again so it doesn't leak, then you can conserve fuel right in here, and it's not quite as essential that you measure how much fuel it takes to bring your meal to a boil. All right, and finally, tip number 6, avoid the need to heat water to clean or wash out bowls and cups. And the way to do that is, 1, eat directly from the bag inside of the Cosy. And that can be done with a Mountain House meal as well. Now, usually, because of the depth of the bag, you're going to need some type of long-handled spoon. I don't have any of the long-handled titanium spoons, but I do have a number of long-handled wooden carved spoons that I made myself. So I can eat, once the meal is fully rehydrated, I just open the bag up, dip in, and I'm ready to eat. And I can do the same thing with any pots that I might have. Again, this one is inside of a Cosy, but even if it wasn't, I could lay it on a bandana if it was still warm, and eat directly from the pot. It also means that's one less thing I have to pack, so a little less weight that I have to pack as well. So if you can avoid heating water to wash your pots out or your bowls out, then you're going to save a lot of fuel. So you might ask, what are you going to do with a dirty pot if that's what you ate from? Well, you can certainly take it to streamside if you have access to a stream and clean it out as best you can with water from the stream. And yes, I know there would appear that there is some risk that you have contaminations inside of your pot at that time. But remember, the next time you add water to this and you bring it to a boil, you've cleaned any contaminants out. So you can minimize the amount of hot water that you or water you have to heat to clean your pots out that way. All right, let's wrap this video up. Okay, so that's 6 ways that you can save fuel while you're out on the trail. And they were, again, number 1, use a filter to sterilize your water. Don't rely on bringing your water to a boil. Number 2, pick meals that are easy to prepare in a minimal amount of time, such as freeze-dried or dehydrated meals. Number 3, pre-soak your meal, either in the pot or in the bag, so that it's partially hydrated when it comes time to heat it up. Number 4, use a Cosy to finish off the rehydration process by keeping the meal warm. Number 5, learn how much fuel it takes to bring your water to a boil so you don't waste your fuel. And if you're able to put your stove out, learn how to reclaim that fuel for later use. And number 6, minimize the amount of dishes that you have to wash, either your bowls or cups or eating utensils. Okay, that's just 6 ways that I came up with. I am sure that you can contribute a lot more ways to saving fuel while you're out in the woods, and I would encourage you to do so by adding them in the comments below. Alright, so if you've enjoyed this video, you may consider subscribing to my channel. But in the meantime, get out and explore, take that path less traveled. It will make all the difference. Bye for now.